I'm billed on the next web thing as internet phenomenon, which I guess kind of puts me about at the level of like a cat which looks like Hitler or something like that. What I would call myself is a designer, and yes, I kind of work very much on the kind of fringes of design, doing this thing called critical design, and I basically do projects which sort of use objects and use narrative to kind of tell some story or to try and kind of investigate in some kind of philosophical way some aspect of the world we live in. So I made an electric toaster starting from raw materials, and this involved going round Britain, going down kind of abandoned mines for kind of 9 months, and in the end I managed to make this, and I was trying really, really hard. So I made all the copper and the iron and all that kind of stuff, and then tried to flog it for, you know, over £1,000. And of course, you know, it's this story, and it's like one man tries to make a toaster, but it's really about kind of the economies of scale and this kind of difficult position we find ourselves in that all of this stuff is so wonderful, makes our life so comfortable, yet we know that it just seems too cheap sometimes, or, you know, we know that it's just the world is so unequal, that kind of thing. So it became a book, and and I guess that's where the internet phenomenon thing came from. But I'm just going to quickly go through another couple of projects I've done. So I worked with a crime and security science research lab at UCL, and I was doing some work about the future of crime, and I was interested in biotechnology, this idea that we'll be able to produce pharmaceuticals using genetically engineered kind of plants, and of course this technology, as it gets kind of more and more kind of better understood, it becomes available to the amateur. And so I was thinking, you know, what's the implications of this? It's the classic dual use problem. You know, a technology for good can also be used for evil. So how are the police going to respond? And I decided that they would set up police bee units, and the bees would just go out, do their bee thing, and they'd come back to the hive, and when bees return to a hive, they do something called a waggle dance to tell the other bees where they've been, and somebody won the Nobel for managing to kind of decode this waggle dance. And so my police bee unit, they take a little sample of the pollen from the bee as it enters the hive, and then they record the waggle dance, and if the pollen shows up some kind of patent infringement or some sort of amateur genetic engineer doing something naughty, they can record the waggle dance the bee does, and then follow the bee's path back to the site of the drugs. I also did a kind of religion sort of tech startup based on the Babylonian god of wisdom and fate called Nebo, and this kind of tech startup, they send you a wireless router, and it starts kind of taking control of everything that you see and hear. And this project is really based on this idea that it's just an acknowledgement of this idea that unless you believe in some kind of supernatural spirit or something like that, then our kind of conscious decisions are essentially mechanistic. So why don't we just acknowledge that and start treating ourselves like the kind of input-output machines we are? And so this religion tech startup basically takes control of everything you can watch, and it produces a wallet that will only let you spend money in certain times, certain places that it knows are good for you. But a more recent project begins with Noggin, and Noggin is my niece's dog, and I was dog sitting this animal, and I was going through a bit of a kind of downer, a bit of a sort of a sad patch in life, as we all do. You know, relationships, money, work, blah, 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 all those kind of things, all just kind of ganging up all at once. And yeah, so I was having a coffee and Noggin was there, and it was just, you know, happy. Noggin is just a kind of happy animal. No worries, no kind of concerns about, you know, what am I doing with my life, no kind of regrets, like, why did I say that? Oh, I can't believe I said that. And so I was looking at this dog and had that thought, you're so lucky. Look, you're so lucky. You're just completely oblivious to all of this kind of crap I'm having to deal with. And, you know, it's not really a new thought. I can remember having the same thought when I was a child, you know, had to kind of trudge off to school, and then there's that kind of cat, the pet cat on the sofa, and you're like, oh, if only I could be you. And yeah, and it kind of reminded me of this sort of question, this from John Stuart Mill, the founder of utilitarianism, and you know, he claims that it's better to be a human being dissatisfied than a pig satisfied. And, you know, if you disagree, it's only because you only know your own side of the question. Well, we all know our own side of the question. And to be honest, I think that looks pretty cool. You know, wouldn't it be lovely to be able to just kind of sort of gallop through the hills and just be kind of free? It would be amazing. So I decided that I'd like to take a holiday from being a human being, and I'd like to kind of be free and kind of gallop and just sort of have no worries. And yeah, and then I didn't have much else on, so I wrote an application to a charity called the Wellcome Trust, and they gave me some money to become an animal. And yeah, yeah, that was nice. You know, they usually fund kind of £1 million cancer research centres, and were instrumental in, I think they did about half of the Human Genome Project in the end. So yeah, but they also have a little bit of money for these kind of projects. So yeah, I said to the Wellcome Trust that I want to be an elephant. I was kind of thinking practically at that stage. I could imagine ways of kind of extending my limbs, but I couldn't imagine a way of extending my neck. And elephants are one of the only, I think the only quadruped that kind of have a short neck. If you look at a horse or a goat or whatever, they've all got long necks. And so I thought, elephant, great, I'll be an elephant, that'll be easy. And, you know, also it looks quite fun. However, when I started, you know, I got the money, started doing some research, and yeah, turns out elephants are kind of, they don't have such an easy emotional life themselves. They're one of the only kind of species, apart from humans, I think it's been observed in dolphins and chimps, that seem to have some kind of, you know, mourning process. When there's a kind of a death in the family, a kind of family of elephants will gather round and sort of seem to mourn, and even if a group of elephants come across the kind of sun-bleached bones of an elephant long dead, they'll kind of stop and examine these objects with much more care than they would the bones of another animal. You know, even a kind of rhino skull doesn't elicit the same response as like an elephant skull. So it's possible that they have some kind of idea of their own mortality. And yeah, I sort of, you know, came to the conclusion that that's exactly what I'm trying to escape, this sort of, this idea, you know, this problem of being a conscious being yet knowing that I'm, you know, destined to die. So I kind of went off elephants and was explaining my problem to a friend in the pub. Oh, I've been given some money to become an elephant, but I really don't want to be an elephant anymore. And yeah, she made an excellent suggestion. She said, that, well, my friend is a shaman, and shamans are kind of experts in human-animal sort of relations. Why don't you go and see her? And she actually lives in Copenhagen, and I was going to Copenhagen to do some teaching, and I went to see her in her kind of little sort of cabin. There you go. Has it got sound? Not very good sound. Hi. Hello, Annette. Hello.
Good timing.
Hi, thank you. Wow, it's an amazing little community sort of houses and so on.
I've been doing garden work recently.
Okay. Is it okay if I film, Annette? Or is it okay if I film video things? No. But you know, we sat down, had some tea, and she, you know, I said, oh, you know, I'm trying to be an elephant, don't want to be an elephant anymore. And she was, you know, well, of course you can't be an elephant. You're an idiot for even thinking you could be an elephant. If you were a Kalahari bushman, you know, you could consider trying to become an elephant, but, you know, you grew up and spent most of your life in suburban London, so you need to be something which you kind of have some sort of shared environmental history, some kind of shared sort of culture with. So you could maybe be a deer. You have deer in London. No, that's too wild for you. Maybe a sheep. I was sort of, you know, didn't really want to be a sheep. But then she said, no, you're a goat. You should definitely be a goat. And I think she was quite right, really. And she was, you know, I guess I went there sort of, oh God, shaman, this sort of new age, like, oh, you know, sort of ready to just kind of dismiss it all. But actually she was really smart and could see where I was coming from. And you know, we had an interesting conversation about Descartes and Heidegger and, you know, etc. So, but she pointed out that, of course, trying to become an animal, it's not a new thing. In fact, you can go back to our kind of earliest sort of cultural, you know, attempts at sort of culture, the kind of earliest cave paintings and the earliest kind of figurines, the earliest pieces of figurative art, and you see these kind of human animal beings. So this is the Lion Man of Hohenstein, and it was carved 40,000 years ago out of mammoth tusk, and it is the earliest kind of piece of figurative art we know of. And yeah, it's a human with a lion's head. And so this kind of idea of trying to become animals has been in our culture for a long time and kind of remains as part of our culture. So how to become an animal? A goat. I went to see a goat behavioral psychologist, and he is trying to work out what is going on inside a goat's brain. That amazing talk that we just saw from Nell, yeah, he's, you know, studies these animals, trying to work out what's going on inside there. And he kind of said, okay, if you're going to become a goat, you need to work out how to turn off your episodic memory, your ability to sort of remember the past as a story, essentially, and also imagine the future as a story, you know, a kind of scenario. And of course you need to turn off your ability to tell people about it, your ability to kind of vocalize and speak. So I went to a neuroscientist who uses transcranial magnetic stimulation to induce virtual lesions, and asked him, okay, can you turn off my ability to remember the past and imagine the future and my ability to speak? And he said no. Yeah, but I can at least interrupt your ability to sort of vocalize.
So there's a non-zero but very small risk that TMS can induce a seizure. So that's the hardcore risk. So this is the TMS coil. It's on and it's set so that it'll do stimulation. If I step on this, You can hear it. It makes a clicking noise.
Yeah.
Basically because the magnetic field sort of comes on and off so quickly that it actually creates what are called the Lorentz forces that make a physical sound.
I suppose it should be, who's that trip trapping over my bridge, said the clock. Yeah.
Yeah, so he was kind of sending this powerful magnetic field into my brain, and that was interacting with the electrical activity of my synapses in a certain part of my cortex and disrupting them, and he was targeting this area called Broca's area. Yeah, he also seemed to be kind of targeting my metal fillings because one of them fell out the next day. But yeah, I mean, he said maybe in 50 years, if you come back, we might have some kind of machine that would be much more specific and let you kind of turn off these parts of your brain. But of course, you'll never know when you actually manage to kind of get to the perspective of a goat, because we don't know what the perspective of a goat is. Yeah, so I kind of moved on to body. I didn't want to be like a cognitive fascist. Bodies are just as important as our brains in kind of determining who we are. And of course, you wouldn't think it would be that difficult to just sort of turn yourself into a quadruped, because if you look at the skeleton of a human, the skeleton of a goat, we've got all the same bits. You know, we're all the same general kind of plan. So this was my first attempt. That wasn't very good. So I decided, okay, you know, I need to think about kind of conservation of momentum, conservation of energy. I need to make it more springy. So this is my second attempt. Yeah, I decided I needed a little bit of assistance, so I got in touch with a professor who's worked on those amazing four-legged DARPA robots, Big Dog and the Cheetah one, and he's now at the Royal Veterinary College, and went to him and said, look, you know, I've already got the kind of the AI bit, you know, and I've got most of the other bits, so, you know, I just want to be able to gallop. You know, that shouldn't be so difficult. And, you know, pointed out this fact that, yeah, we're, you know, me and a goat, we've got the same basic plan. There's, you know, not very much difference between us. So surely it should be quite easy to kind of transform myself back into a goat. And he pointed out, well, okay, so there were all these homologous structures between humans and quadrupeds. But there's also these homologous structures between humans and basically every other life form on the planet. So if you're saying that means it should be easy to transform yourself into a goat, then you're also saying you should be able to transform yourself into a bat or, like, you know, a mollusk or something, which could be good for the next project. However, you know, we kind of carried on talking, and he gave me a little bit of a tour of what he does, his day job. This gets a little bit gory, so if anyone's squeamish, then they should probably look away. Opened up this shipping container, and it's full of kind of frozen bits of animal. Took me into, like, the lab. Oh God, there's some hooves in a wheelbarrow. What's going on? And he was in the middle of dissecting a snow leopard. And I said, oh, so how many goats have you dissected? And to my surprise, he said none. And so I said, would you like to dissect a goat? And he said, okay. And I said, if I can get a dead goat, can we dissect it? And he said, yeah, sure. So I kind of started thinking, where could I get a dead goat from? Thinking back to Professor, the goat ethologist, and the goats he studies at the goat sanctuary. And yeah, basically went back to Buttercup's goat sanctuary and said, do you have any dead goats? And they said, well, no. They were actually, you know, these people, they love these goats. And, you know, but unfortunately one of them was kind of had this terrible like wasting disease, and eventually they agreed that I could take Venus's body, this is Venus, once she died, and on the condition that we did a kind of biopsy and autopsy and find out what it was that was killing her. So unfortunately Venus died, and unfortunately Venus died on a Sunday, so she had to stay overnight in my fridge. And then I took her the next day to the Royal Veterinary College, and we began this process of this interesting process of Venus kind of turning from recognizably an animal into, which is kind of recognizable through this kind of intermediate stage, which I'm completely unfamiliar with, and then kind of into the kind of familiar sort of meat bits. But it was kind of fascinating, and just something that you don't see, the kind of under the skin of animals. But it was also very instructive. This is Venus's brain. It's about the 10th the size of ours. And so I went back to the workshop and kind of was getting a bit better, but started realizing that I'm just running into the exact same problems that an amputee would face. How to stop my skin from rubbing on the kind of interfaces between my body and the kind of prosthetics I was making. So I contacted some prosthetists, and said, I'm trying to be a goat, can I come up and, we can do a consultation, and to my delight they said yes. So they kind of put me in various different things to try and work out how I could become a goat, and I spent the day walking around their clinic on sort of four legs, and eventually they agreed they would make me some goat legs. Guts. So I kind of thought I'm not going to be very free as a goat if I have to kind of worry about working so I can get some money so I can go and eat kind of thing. And of course goats eat grass, and humans can eat grass, but the trouble is we can't digest it. So I sort of thought, okay, I need to be able to come up with a way of digesting grass, and the reason goats can digest grass is because they have a rumen, and it is this, it's like a kind of stomach before their true stomach, and it's a whole extra bit which contains completely different gut bacteria and gut fungi, which are specialized in breaking down the kind of tough cellulose fibers in grass. So I thought, okay, I need to make myself an artificial rumen. So I cast a kind of bag in silicone, a U-shaped bag, and my plan was that I could chew up grass, chew, spit it into one end of the bag, and then inside this bag I would have a sample of the fluid taken from a goat's rumen, and then that kind of bacteria and fungi would just kind of grow and culture inside the bag, which I would have strapped to my chest so it was kind of approximately the right temperature, and then after a few hours I could suck out the kind of bacteria grassy fermented milkshake from the other end. Before doing this I thought I should take some advice, so I went to Aberystwyth where they have a rumen biology lab, and they actually use artificial rumens to study the efficiency of rumens, and they've actually kind of worked out that if they add certain additives to a goat's feed or a rumen's feed, then they can sort of completely get rid of the methane that is produced, and which is a kind of major contributor to global warming, and it doesn't seem to kind of affect the process at all. It's kind of amazing. And I said, okay, I've made this bag and this is my plan, and they were like, yes, good, yes, that would all work, and then I'm going to eat it out the other end. And they suddenly became much more kind of hands off and started speaking in kind of legalese and said, we really strongly recommend you don't do that, because not only are you in danger, would you be in danger of giving us, just like puking, you would be in danger of giving yourself some kind of serious long-term gut kind of parasite, because we just don't know what is going on in there. We've been studying it for 50 years and we still don't know the kind of full extent of this kind of ecosystem inside a goat's rumen. So I took that advice on board, and then went to the Alps. I'd said to the Wellcome Trust I was going to cross the Alps as an elephant, because obviously I was keen to, make it sound as exciting as possible when I was writing the application form. And when they eventually found out that I wasn't thinking of being an elephant anymore, they kind of got a bit angry. But anyway, so I contacted this goat farm, and I'd been emailing Sepp, he's a goat herd, and I'd said, I'd love to come and stay on the farm for a few days. And then when I got there, I said, oh yeah, and also I want to kind of join the herd. And to my relief, he was very cool, and once he'd kind of understood what I was trying to say, and agreed to let me join the herd. However, he said, tomorrow is the day where we do this kind of annual migration where we herd the goats down the mountain to the summer pastures. And that was an extremely difficult morning. Obviously, I'd experimented with my prosthetics in the flat at home in London, but I'd never kind of gone out down an extremely steep, rocky kind of mountainside. But for a while, it was brilliant. I was amongst the herd, we were all kind of trotting along, but kind of all too soon, the goats just kind of disappeared into the distance, and I was kind of left alone, high on a hill. And yeah, that was kind of depressing, but I picked myself up and basically spent the rest of the day kind of gradually getting ever closer to the pasture where the goats were. So I spent 3 days with the herd of goats, and then another 3 days trying to cross the Alps. Never did sort out the neck thing. Yeah, and it was kind of a fantastic time. I ended up having to pressure cooker all of the grass that I was sort of eating. It wasn't that nice. So yeah, it was a kind of beautiful time. Eventually got to a glacier and kind of disappeared, walked off into the sunset. And I guess the project is kind of trying to provide a different aesthetic to this idea of the future, this kind of post-humanness kind of thing, a bit more sort of gritty and raw, and also perhaps to sort of, if we can't even become goats yet, then maybe talk of uploading our brains to a computer is a little bit premature. I'm not sure. And also, yeah, it's telling a story as well. So, yeah, thank you. Sorry.
So thanks very much, Thomas. Whoever knew that goats could be so fascinating. So I have one question for you. You did this project to sort of be relieved of the burden of being human for a while.
Yeah.
But was there anything you more appreciated about being human when you came back?
Oh, everything, warmth, kind of being on 2 legs, eating nice food. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I wasn't a very good goat either, but yeah.
So did this enhance your life basically after
Yeah, it
having done
did.
this?
Yeah. But then it's kind of stressful as well, because then it's like you've done a project and now you have to go and talk about it. And yeah.